Hello everybody and welcome to NFC Season 4, Episode 1. NFC stands for Not From Concentrate, which is the name of our company, and also is the name of the video series that I've been doing with Sapphire, in which I make a mod from absolute scratch featuring one of their graphics cards. So here we have Sariel. The mod is finished and we really are proud of it, and here is what it took to make this a reality from an idea. Well, once I got my workshop cleaned out of my Pontiac, Montana, my wife's Pontiac, Montana, which was needing some serious surgery, it just meant that we had a little less time to design the product, which was a great thing, because that meant that I had to borrow an idea from the very first NFC build that I ever did with Sapphire, with RERELEASE. Now, RERELEASE has the GPU featured fully in the front, and uses purple heart as the base, kind of like the side of the entire frame, and I wanted to tribute that computer case for this build. The design actually took no time at all, maybe 2 days to actually flesh out and make all the parts and pieces for it, which was really great because sometimes an idea can languish in the design. So last time we did a build together, we kind of failed at setting up the bender.
Well, we didn't have that installed at the time.
It was a little bit over my head. I mean, I would have said it wasn't, but luckily this time Chi came to our rescue. He is our friend and electrician, and he travels the country in his RV, but made a stop just for us and did a beautiful job setting it up. Knowing that we could confidently bend metal, we began work cutting the parts. And the first part was the aluminum frame, the skeleton, the thing that supports everything. And we put that on the CNC and we milled it out, and it actually did a great job until we went to mill the center out. And because our spoil board was spoiled...
Yeah, we forgot to actually resurface it, so...
And I didn't bolt it into the spoil board, it came loose and nearly destroyed all of our work and broke a bit. But we got lucky by the grace of God, and I was able to re-origin it and get it cut out, and the part came out pretty well. With the part cut, I had to break in that bender, break in the brake, fist bump, break in the brake, and it bent it beautifully. And it was so amazing to feel that a 5mm thick aluminum 6061T was able to be bent so easily on that brake, and I knew we were in business. With the aluminum out of the way, it was time to move on to the stainless steel, which is another hurdle that we had to get set up, because my laser is set up to cut wood and acrylic, but not metal, and to do that it needs a metal focusing lens, which was simple enough to install, and gas, in this particular case oxygen. So I routed the oxygen cables, I hooked it up to the oxygen tank, no big deal, but it wouldn't focus on the metal, so the program wouldn't run and the gas wouldn't start blowing. Turns out that it uses conductivity and amplifies it somehow to be able to track where that metal is. So after I peeled off that sticky backing, which is supposed to help the reflectivity of the stainless steel and cut better, but once I pulled that off, we were good to go. So a major problem became a very easy fix. So as I was cutting, I tried a bunch of different settings. None of them seemed to work. Eventually, we were able to cut the stainless, but I left a lot of slag at the bottom of the part. Nothing that couldn't be cleaned up, but I know that I can get a better finish. So maybe you guys can comment below about the speeds and feeds that you use on your laser to help me out in the future. When the parts were cut out, it was time to give them a generous sanding. And that's where John really went to town.
Yeah, generous is an understatement. We started at about 80 grit, went to 150, then to 400, and then wet sanded 400, and then to 800, wet sanded 800, and then 1000.
And for hours and hours, entire 2 days spent wet sanding. And John was an absolute hero and got it done. But we needed that beautiful, crisp chrome look for these parts. And we had that with your effort, so I appreciate that. Oh, I forgot, bending that stainless steel. That was also a challenge because the GPU bracket, I didn't think it was going to be able to be bent. I designed it because I wanted something super stiff to hold that big GPU up and not flex at all, because a flexing mod is cheesy. But the part I made had a 7mm flange, and after a 7mm flange is bent over, it becomes like a 3mm flange with that radius. And I didn't think I could get the machine to grip 3mm millimeters of material and bend that thick stainless part. And
There
it
it is.
did. And that was the point where
We are
The bender's worth every penny.
every penny. Was so happy to see that. After that, we threw it in the vise, tapped it with some tap magic, and we had a beautiful GPU bracket that went to polishing. Yeah, polishing. A lot of polishing for all these parts, guys. The aluminum, the stainless steel. And once you got it all polished, you realize, wait, and we'd go back and start over again on the sanding from scratch. But that's what you need to do if you want a chrome looking part. Now for the acrylic is an easy part to make, and I had that set up in the machine to CNC, and I was excited to have a video of that because acrylic flakes look awesome.
My
And
fault.
we forgot to hit record on the camera, so can't show you that, but we can show you more hours of sanding for that hand-frosted look. Now, with the acrylic part, the idea was to take it and put it into the laser and then laser out the logo because you can't get a tool into that small wing and get the corners that you want. But unfortunately, the laser was so strong that it shredded it. So I actually had to go back and use a Dremel and Dremel out our Angel logo by hand. And that meant that you had to do more sanding by hand. But eventually we had a beautiful looking acrylic part for the back of our system. Now, the most challenging part and the most intensive part was the Purple Heart base. The Purple Heart is the wood that we chose, again, because we had used it before in the first episode of NFC, and I wanted to bring it back. Purple Heart is difficult because it is so dense and so hard that it's like a ceramic, and you can break tools, burn tools very easily, and you can chip the wood because it's not going to, I don't know, I'm not a woodworking guy, but it's difficult to machine.
It feels like a composite material.
Yeah, it totally does. But luckily, I got the speeds and feeds right in Fusion 360 and used an adaptive clearing strategy, and it worked out amazingly well. And I had a beautiful part that cut really, really well and sounded great cutting as well. Now, the problem was drilling it. I loaded the Fisher Chromium Vanadium brad point drill into the machine to put those holes in, and I didn't get the feeds and speeds right for that, so I burned up my drill bit, unfortunately, but the part looked great. After that, it was a lot of sanding and then matching that stainless steel base to it, which I used with a countersinking bit and just made sure to line everything up by hand because the machines aren't going to be totally precise, and when you're making one part and another part, you really want to mate them and just make them yourselves. So you have a perfectly fitted part at the end of the day, right? Because when you're making something in the computer, 1 millimeter you can make in the computer, but you can't get that kind of tolerance out of the kind of equipment I use. So gotta do stuff with the old eyeball. Once the Purple Heart was machined and drilled, I wanted to finish it. And to do that, I started with a polyurethane, which I hated, and then I went to a polyacrylic, which I hated even more for that plastic look, although it did have that neat depth to it, but still it kind of took the soul out of the wood. And then I French polished it because I thought French polishing would make the look that I wanted, but it didn't really work so well with Purple Heart for my taste. So I stripped it again and went with the tung oil, which is what I use for all of my bezels at NFC Systems, and it produces that beautiful warm glow that still feels like organic wood,
Right.
but has a little depth to it from the oil as well. I couldn't be happier because that Purple Heart is purple.
Man, is it purple. And even the chips from the CNC, from the first cut, after they laid out in the normal air, they got more purple over time. It was wild.
Like they oxidize. So you sand the Purple Heart, leave it out with a fan over it for like a couple of days, and it will get to that really beautiful purple color. If you leave it in the sun or cover it up, it can be red and brown and looks nasty. But we have a beautiful part that I'm really happy with. To get everything lined up perfectly, I actually use the 3D printer, the Markforged, which is a very expensive machine, but I'm lucky to be able to rent it from Craig. Thank you, Craig. And I use it to make washers. Washers and shims, because you can print off really just perfect shim sizes, perfect washer sizes, which was necessary because I have the stainless steel parts and I needed to have the standoffs for the motherboard come up to the same level. So I was able to print off precise washers that made those two parts match, which was really awesome. The other plastic component was the cable clips, and there's something that's called cable combs. My original intent was to purchase them from Bill Owen at MNPC Tech, or from Titan Rig because they got awesome cable combs, but I didn't have time, so I knew I had to make them myself. So I got a piece of acrylic, I hand sanded it for the frosted look, and I lasered them out, and I found that it's not easy to design cable combs that don't break as soon as you pick them up. Some of them disintegrated as soon as I put them in my hand, but after a couple more designs, I had a nice stack of cable combs that were going to work for us, and they didn't look too bad either. Okay, so with all of the parts made for the chassis, it was time to start modifying parts to work together. And the first thing up in the chopping block was the HDPlex 400, which I had to disassemble because my plan was to press in these little nutserts, which are brass, and press it into the aluminum, which is softer. And I didn't know if it was going to work. I thought I might crack the aluminum possibly, but it didn't. I used my 12-ton Harbor Freight press, which I used to press Jeep bearings and stuff, but it turned out marvelous, went really smoothly, and I had a nice rigid part that I could bolt to my stainless steel bracket. So I had my power supply and power supply bracket mounted together, but it needed more pop. The top of it was the mounting plate, the base plate, and it was kind of ugly to be honest because it's not meant to be shown. So I wanted to get a little more pop with some carbon fiber. So I went out and I CNC'd some carbon fiber to cover it, and then later said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I put little carbon fiber plates over all the things I thought were ugly in the build? And so I went out and I hand dremeled little plates, which you'll see throughout the build, to cover ugly parts of different components and pieces. So I got our carbon fiber fix. Now the stars of the show, of course, are the PC components, and starting with the ones I chose, I went with an ASRock motherboard, which I like ASRock for lots of reasons. For the CPU, AMD is actually sending us a CPU. We don't know what it is yet, so we have a temporary one. We think it's a 3600, but that's on AMD. And to cool it off, I went with the Zeiss Shuriken 3. Funny story, I used the Shuriken 3 and I did a video a while back. That was sponsored by Zeiss. They sent me that cooler, and I really liked it a lot, so I've been using it in different builds. I called Jerry up from Scythe, actually sent him an email, and I was like, Jerry, could you please send me another cooler? I'm doing a video for Sapphire, and we'd love to feature your cooler because I really like it. And Jerry, sly dog that he was, pretended not to understand and was like, sure, yeah, absolutely, you're allowed to take some video of the Shuriken 3. That'd be great. So I went to Amazon and purchased it. Well played, Jerry. Well played. So this video is not sponsored by Scythe, so I took off the Scythe logo on the fan. Next up was the RAM, and normally I don't talk about RAM because it's RAM, but the RAM that we used is the G-Skill Royale, and oh my goodness, beautiful, beautiful chrome-plated RAM with those crystalline structures on top. It looks cheesy, okay? It looks gaudy and cheesy online, but in person, it is something else. And in this build with the other polished chrome parts and stainless steel parts, and the other LEDs, and
the shine. It looks
glorious.
It looks beautiful. Absolutely
glorious. But of course, all of these computer parts would be for naught if it wasn't for the star of the show, which is the Sapphire 5500 XT Nitro. This card is just beautiful looking. I was really hyped about it. It fits in the build and has so many different materials and qualities about it. It has that black, the different blacks and the textures of the blacks, like the hexagonal pattern.
Yeah, the hexagonal pattern with the little bits of texture inside of each of them.
That ties in with the carbon fiber plates we have. It has the kind of sandblasted aluminum look to it. It has like the polished look to it. So we have all these different pieces in our mod, and we have the pieces in the graphics card, and they all just mesh together so well.
They complement each other really well.
So the assembly process is my favorite part because we get to lay out all the components and parts that we made and look at them and go, yay, they look so nice. And we didn't have to do too many modifications, to be honest. There was a little bit of drilling, a little bit of filing, but the only thing we really had to work on was the GPU bracket. We originally intended to rivet it to the frame, but there wasn't enough meat to do that. The rivets were just too long. So I did end up drilling through, but I ended up liking that look a lot better because the stainless steel bolts we had look really cool. So it went together very well. With the chassis mostly assembled, I needed to make the base wired up. And the wiring of any build, I don't hate. I don't hate the wiring, figuring out the runs and the lengths and trying to get the DC jack and the power button routed through that base and up through those holes and behind the boards. That wasn't a hard part. It didn't take very long to crimp the cables and wires and get them all perfect, but sleeving it.
Sleeving was very difficult. And you left that to me.
I did. And I'm so proud of this guy. It took me a month or more to get to where he got in an hour. And I'm being completely honest. He has a magic touch. He is an amazing sleever. And we're going to get him sleeving those Skywire cables. But just a beautiful job. It was so challenging. And you don't know if you knew this or not, because it's your first build. But to do those little ones, so much harder than doing, a 12 or 16-inch cable. Every single one was done by hand, everyone to a specific length. Even the 24-pin.
Yeah, the 24-pin was very difficult because it's about an inch from one side of the connector to the other. So it was very difficult to braid the sleeving with the wiring because you're going from top to bottom, from point to point, and it just has to work so it bends and fits in perfectly. But I love how it turned out.
So the final build, we are so proud of just how all the little details that came together, running back in the shop to go make another little part here or there, really paid off. Things like the 180-degree PCB adapter for the video card power cable, which allowed us to really compact that in place. The beautiful work you did in the sleeving, the polishing that you did. I really could not have done this without you. You have such an attention to detail, John, that I really appreciate and makes this build just pop. I can't even actually say what my favorite part of the build is. I think it's not necessarily any one thing. It's mostly the integration of the graphics card and how everything else reflects the design cues of the graphics card, but still manages to be its own art piece on its own. I like how functional this design is. I like how you can easily plug things into it. I like that you could upgrade it if you wanted to in the future. I like that it takes up so little space on your desk. And I love that blend of organic materials with like the Purple Heart, with stuff like the composites, the carbon fiber, and the acrylic, and that mineral type feel that you get from all the polished metal. And funny enough, like even the little diamond stuff on the G-Skill RAM.
Yeah, it's everything complements each other very well, and it's practical. This isn't just a build that you would pass off to somebody and say, okay, I never want to see it again.
Yeah.
This is actually something I want.
Yeah, and put on my desk. I really want to build my own, but oh my goodness, 2 weeks of hard labor.
Yeah, well, get some Red Bulls.
Well, we'll see. Maybe Sapphire will send us a GPU so that we can build ourselves our own one. But they are giving this one away. So thanks to Sapphire for sponsoring NFC Season 4, Episode 1, The Building of Sariel. Finally, I want to thank our Patreons for supporting NFC Systems YouTube channel. Thank you for subscribing to it. And we're going to be releasing the CAD files for this system and the CAM files, so you can go machine and make this particular computer chassis your very selves. And you can see all the work that goes into it when you start polishing it and sanding everything. But all my 3D files for my mods are available to my Patreon subscribers. Sign up there and you can go to the back catalog and download those files. So thanks again for watching, everybody. Thank you to Sapphire. Thank you to Patreon. And we'll see you for episode 2 of Not From Concentrate Season 4.